Let's start with our breathing and setting our motivation to focus our awareness on improving our minds, developing our positive qualities, and learning ways to counter negative habits of mind that keep surfacing, and just have a real gentle attitude towards the practice in general, accepting ourselves for showing up and trying our best. So with that motivation, we'll do 15 minutes silent sitting, just feeling your body sitting, noticing your posture, adjusting your posture so that the energy flows in your body, releasing places where you're holding tension. Just gradually settle into your breath, letting the body breathe however it needs to, just being present with the breath as it changes from moment to moment, noticing the physical sensation of breathing. Breathing in, breathing out, and periodically through the meditation, just check in to see if you're still focused on the breathing or lost in a daydream, planning something. And when you notice the mind has wandered, just bring yourself back gently. Come back to the breath and the awareness of that constant changing nature of the breath. So you can open your eyes whenever you're ready. Last week we started talking about karma, and so I want to finish talking about that today, and hopefully we'll make time at the end for questions. We'll see how far we get. So last week, we all witnessed the midterm elections and saw all the political theater that's likely to continue for the next few years and beyond, and lots of disinformation campaigns and character assassinations, and it has a real negative effect on our minds. It can, if you kind of fall into the negativity of all of that. And it's just a reminder that this is the nature of samsara, which isn't actually a physical place, but a state of mind that individuals get stuck in. The three poisons of ignorance, anger, and attachment drive us around in circles in all realms of existence. And because we haven't actualized the path to awakening within our mind stream, we've never experienced true lasting freedom. And yet, at any moment, because every sentient being's mind is fundamentally pure, only temporarily obscured by adventitious stains that can be removed, it's possible for us to wake up from ignorance once and for all. So far, we've focused on the small scope, which is Buddha's advice in order to avoid being reborn in the lower realms. But even in the upper realms, there is no lasting relief from suffering and no guarantees that we might not slip back into rebirth in one of the lower realms, as long as the seeds of negative karma haven't been eliminated from our mind. So today we'll hopefully finish the teachings on karma and begin exploring the medium scope teachings, which recognize the shortcomings of merely focusing on a higher rebirth. In our first discussion on karma, we talked about the 3 physical non-virtues: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. There are 4 non-virtues of speech, which underscores how powerful our words are in the creation of karma. And speech happens today in many different mediums. It can be verbal, written, electronic, via social media and email, or even through sign language or gestures. The 4 non-virtues of speech are lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle talk or gossip. The first one, lying, most often occurs when someone intentionally says something that isn't true. But lying can also happen by being silent. For example, if someone says something we know not to be true, and we make even a small gesture like a nod that could be interpreted as agreement, that is the karma of lying. So just kind of a personal reflection here, I thought, white people, in my opinion, have a moral responsibility to counter racist speech, especially if we have knowledge and understanding of the harms of racism. Being silent in the face of racism that one witnesses could be a negative virtue, in my opinion, though there could be other factors involved depending upon the exact situation. Harsh speech is using our words to intentionally hurt others. Many of us heard the nursery rhyme when we were children: "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me." Actually, words can kill. For example, online bullying happens through words and is a likely factor in many teen suicides. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for people aged 15 to 24. So it's important to always speak kindly and recognize changes in behavior among young people that could be a warning sign, and invite them to share their feelings or offer them resources such as the new National 988 hotline. Divisive speech is of 2 kinds: using words in order to cause a split between 2 people who are friends, or using words in order to prevent 2 people from reconciling. It doesn't even really have to be people we know. It can be just, again, talking on social media is sort of like having a global conversation, I think. And our words can ripple out, and that divisive speech happens so often there on places like, social media. So last is idle chatter, or senseless talk or gossip, which is speaking whatever comes into our mind with no clear purpose. There are many varieties described, such as quarreling, talking about others' faults, arguing, reading books that stimulate afflictive mind states, such as desire, and complaining or bewailing our circumstances if things aren't going well for us. I see this all the time on Facebook. There's a difference between asking for help and genuinely sharing feelings, which I think is healthy, especially given the level of social isolation in modern society. There's so much loneliness in the world today, and not just among the elderly. All of this was, of course, exacerbated by the pandemic. But there's a balance between reaching out for help, seeking the support of others when we need emotional support, versus habitually going on in a way that only amplifies our ego's deluded story about our life, me, I, mine, and so forth. So this is a really delicate point. When I was in my 30s, I saw a psychotherapist weekly for 4 years. The therapist practiced a form of counseling called co-counseling, which encouraged us to dig up old memories and release our stuck feelings. The sessions seemed to be largely focused on getting an emotional release. It was considered a really good session if you ended up shaking and sobbing on the floor. Certainly, if one has suppressed feelings, it's important to become aware of them and work on releasing them. But beyond that, there's no need to manufacture new feelings, which only serve to strengthen our chain in samsara. As one of my teachers would often say, we've all had infinite childhoods. So we don't have to go back and look at all of them and remember how terrible they were, because, the larger point is we're stuck in samsara. And soon we'll be talking about something called the 12 links of interdependent origination, which elaborate on the process of being stuck in samsara. And feeling is the seventh link in that chain. And so it's important to just be really mindful of feelings. I'll say more about that in another time. Another form of idle talk is exchanging news about politics, kings, presidents, queens, nations, and so forth, with no purpose other than to tell stories. Again, as with all of these, there's a balance. If there's a legitimate intention to talk about issues in a way that helps you figure out which way to vote, that's healthy. If it's just to play, let's pile on to all the negative and cynical talk about a person or an issue, then that's a negative virtue. There are many other forms of idle talk. If you ever have the opportunity to do a silent meditation retreat, it's extremely powerful to take a vow of silence, even for a day. Learning to speak less in general has a calming effect on the mind, and is of great benefit when we sit in meditation and attempt to focus on the Dharma without having a pop song or a TV show agitating our thoughts. If we do have to speak, it's important to think about the purpose of our words. Before we speak, we can ask ourselves three things. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? It's very difficult to quiet the mind. All of us have so many thought programs going on in modern life. Many people don't know how to turn off the mind and then end up having sleep issues. Taking time out every day to just breathe, whether that be during meditation or on a walk through the park, is an essential part of emotional and spiritual health. The three mental non-virtues are covetousness, malice, and wrong views. Coveting happens when we see an object and make a plan to get it. Of course, part of survival in modern society involves shopping for food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and so on. But beyond that, what do we really need? I'm not suggesting here that we get rid of all our stuff and move into a cave. The point here, again, is to look at how the mind of desire is such a powerful force in our lives, and to consider how much simpler our lives would be if we weren't driven to consume. Not to mention how the planet's carrying capacity is giving us feedback that our desire is responsible for a growing ecological problem related to climate deforestation and so forth. Do we need to go window shopping in the mall or look at the advertisements in magazines in the office waiting room? Maybe we could sign off of all the catalog mailing lists and not be responsible for those trees being cut. Do we have to go shopping on Black Friday? Do I need to buy a bunch of plastic stuff for Halloween, Christmas, Easter, and all the other sacred holidays which have been commercialized? What am I teaching my children and others about happiness when I engage in these rituals? Malice, like coveting, happens unconsciously all the time. We feel wronged by someone and make a plan to get back at them, or just kind of have like an unconscious force of energy or anger that we want to send their way. In doing so, we immediately harm our bodhisattva vow if we've taken those. As long as we're creating a world view of us versus them, we'll never be able to realize the true selfless nature of reality, which is the key to spiritual liberation. Wrong views hold something that exists to be non-existent, or the reverse, holding something which does not exist to exist. It is considered the heaviest of the three non-virtues of the mind. And the most damaging instance occurs when we deny karmic cause and effect, or adamantly say that there's no such thing as past and future lives, no path to enlightenment, and so forth. It's okay to have doubts about some of these topics, but if you close your mind and conclude that these don't exist, it's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, shooting your karmic chances for liberation and enlightenment, and probably a direct ticket to the lower realms if we just decide to ignore karma. In almost all of these 10 non-virtues, there are always 4 parts that need to occur for it to be considered a complete karma: the basis or object, the intention, the actual action, and the completion of the action. To give an example, several years ago, I bought a used bicycle for my daughter from a longtime friend. At some point, I became suspicious about my friend's business and decided to check the serial number of the bike against the online registry of stolen bikes. And sure enough, my daughter's bike had been stolen. I confronted my friend and he gave a lame justification for his actions. I told him that wasn't acceptable and I haven't spoken to him since. I contacted the previous owner and gave the bicycle back, even though that meant losing the $700 in cash that I gave my friend. Although my former friend wasn't involved in the actual act of theft, he definitely received the full weight of the karma, in my opinion, due to his being accessory to the crime, in that he had full knowledge that he was trafficking in stolen property. So all 4 parts of the karma were present: the bike as the object, the intention to purchase a stolen bicycle, the action to take possession of the stolen bicycle, and then the completion, which was the thought, this bike is now mine to profit from by reselling to some unsuspecting buyers. There was also some lying karma involved, as he told me at one point that he didn't think it was a hot bike. During the time I had the stolen bike in my possession, my daughter and I also both had the karma of stealing, although it was incomplete because I had no intention to steal. Sort of like when we unknowingly step on a bug on the sidewalk. There's a little bit of karma of killing because we weren't careful and unknowingly stepped on the bug, but because there wasn't the intention to kill, the karma is incomplete. From a karma point of view, it's better not to step on the bug at all, but much less severe than stepping on the bug intentionally. On the other hand, if once I realized that the bike was stolen, I had the thought, damn, I paid for that bicycle, it's mine, and then decided not to contact the original owner, rationalizing, it's not my fault that it's stolen, then that would make the karma more complete because there's an intention to knowingly keep something that actually belongs to someone else. So in the end, I decided $700 was a small price to pay. In order to keep my karma clean, it was a no-brainer. And in choosing that path, I probably cleared away some past karma of my own, either this life or in the past life when I stole something of value. And it's said that when you clear away karma like that, you eliminate a cause to be born in the lower realms, or if you're a human being, you eliminate the karma of being born human in past. So there's many other topics within the discussion of karma in the Lam Rim Chenmo texts, such as throwing karma versus completing karma, the results of the 10 negative karmas, what makes a karma heavy or light. And I encourage you to do further study. And as you pointed out, Jeremy, last week, it's important not to get depressed thinking about the 10 non-virtues when we can also put a lot of positive energy into practicing the 10 virtues, which are protecting life and property, maintaining good sexual ethics, always speaking the truth in a skillful way with compassion and an intention to bring harmony, refraining from participating in gossip, practicing contentment and simple living, and meditating on love and altruism, and studying the teachings on reality so that we can align our minds with ultimate truth. And another important practice here is to review your actions at the end of the day before bed, rejoicing in any positive virtues that you've created and purifying negative actions. There are a few methods for purifying, but they all utilize what are termed the four opponent powers. These powers oppose the force of the non-virtuous karma. The four powers are regret, restoring the relationship, the determination not to repeat, and remedial action. Regret is the most important of the four powers, and it's important not to conflate regret with guilt, which adds a layer of self-criticism and self-condemnation to just a simple understanding of wrongdoing. Regret is simply a clear acknowledgement that we've performed a non-virtuous action with no added portions of guilt. When you recognize that you've done something harmful, try to just generate an understanding of why it is harmful, not because Buddha said so, but using your own reasoning to think about the implications of your action. Ask yourself why this action brings suffering to other beings or harms your own spiritual progress. At the same time, be mindful of the very sneaky tendency for a heavily conditioned guilt habit to poison this reflection. Restoring the relationship has two aspects: sentient beings and holy beings. Reciting the refuge prayer restores our connection with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and reciting the bodhicitta prayer restores our connection with all sentient beings. Some negative actions are very difficult not to repeat, and so it's not realistic to promise never to repeat them again. Nonetheless, we can create an intention, just to try our best, or say, well, I'm not going to repeat this action. Say, for example, I won't gossip for the next 24 hours. Just trying to take little baby steps in the right direction, rather than setting ourselves up for failure by just saying, I'm never going to do this again. And then we feel really disappointed when we can't meet that expectation. Lastly, remedial action can take many forms, such as reading or listening to the Dharma, attending Dharma teachings, being involved in charity work, or doing a meditation on Vajrasattva, the Buddha of purification. So just a little explanation of Tantric Buddhism. So there are many deities such as Medicine Buddha, Chenrezig, Vajrasattva, Tara, Kalachakra, and these all have different meanings that they embody different qualities. They're thought to be idealized manifestation of these mental qualities that we need to perfect if we wish to become enlightened. But people often think, oh, well, are they just imaginary? Are they just something? And I've never seen them personally, but I have faith that they do exist on a very subtle spiritual plane to people, beings whose spiritual evolution is advanced enough to perceive them. For the rest of us, there are images painted on traditional Tibetan thangkas, which can be studied. And Tantric Buddhism comes after one has completed the highest scope of the Lam Rim, and is based on a strong foundation of the three principal aspects of the path, which are the determination to be free, often referred to as renunciation. That's when you enter the middle scope of wanting to not be born in samsara again. And bodhicitta is the second principal aspect, and finally the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So you really need those three things before you can skillfully enter the tantric path. Before 1959, which was the beginning of the Tibetan diaspora, Tantric Buddhism was only taught to the most sincere students with years of training, and then only when the teacher thought that they were ready. However, in the past half century or so, these teachings have been more openly shared, from a conscious choice, balancing the importance of preserving Tibetan Buddhist culture in the world as it gets destroyed in Tibet now. So with that, we've very briefly covered the small scope of the Lam Rim, which centers on the goal of wishing for a fortunate rebirth. At this point, it's important to reflect that even if we attain a fortunate rebirth, I'm still stuck in samsara. Samsara is another Sanskrit word, which is usually translated as cyclic existence. Basically, we are born under the influence of karma and delusion. We die without any control of where we will be reborn. And we experience many forms of suffering in all the various realms, not just the lower realms, but even in the human and God realms, we experience suffering. So some of those sufferings in the upper realms are traditionally described in 8 categories: birth, aging, sickness, death, being separated from what we want, meeting with what we don't want, not getting what we want, even though we try very hard. And the last is just kind of a summary of all of those, which is being under the control of the contaminated aggregates. Okay, so that's kind of a loaded technical phrase. I'll just break it down here. Contaminated means controlled by delusion and karma. And the aggregates is a translation of the Sanskrit term skanda, which refers to the 5 components of sentient beings. The literal translation of skanda is a heap, which just suggests a pile of stuff. It sort of kind of attacks that notion of how we're special. When you think about it, we're just a pile of these five things. So these 5 are the form aggregate, or the physical body, and the 4 mental aggregates, which are feeling, which is either painful, pleasant, or neutral, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So these 5, when under the control of ignorance and karma, are another way of thinking about our suffering existence in samsara. And once we realize this, we generate the determination to be free, to attain liberation or nirvana. So I just said, suffering, that's kind of the main focus. And, that's a translation of the Sanskrit term dukkha, or actually, dukkha. And, many early scholars of Buddhism said, Buddhism is just kind of a really negative religion that says life is a bummer. It's not really. Suffering maybe isn't quite the right word. It's sort of like dissatisfactoriness, like we never quite get what we want, just like Mick Jagger said in the song. Can't get no satisfaction, even though I tried. So try not to be too put off or misled by that term suffering. It's all of these terms, it's important to kind of dig into them a little bit and make they have very special meanings that we only really understand after we've done a lot of meditation on them. And in the same way, the determination to be free, which is the sort of the mark of somebody who is in the middle scope and practicing on that level, that was often translated as renunciation, but that can lead to a mistaken understanding of living like an ascetic which isn't really realistic for most people. Let's see how are we doing on our time. So yeah, let's stop there. I think that's enough. I don't want to just talk right up until 9:30. And so that was quite a download of information, but thanks for listening. And let me know if you have any, love to hear thoughts or questions or reflections, doubts.
Yeah, I've listened to many teachings on karma, but I'm not sure if there's like one primary text, like Tibetan text that goes into depth about karma. Do you know, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, in the Lam Rim teachings, there's quite an extensive section on karma, and Geshe Sopa wrote this 5-volume commentary on the Lam Rim Chenmo, and most of the second volume is devoted to karma. I mean, it's like 400 pages or something, and it's pretty. It's not difficult reading. It's requires a lot of thinking and reflection. So yeah, and I didn't cover so much of, there's a lot of other points of karma.
I know I can turn myself away from social media and media in general, but I just hearing the four types of negative virtue, it just feels like it's everywhere. And then if you quiet the mind, like that's a great space to be in, but then as soon as you engage with others, it just reappears. So I find that challenging. And it feels like work, doing that back and forth when you're choosing to, focus away from those things, and then you step back into the world with others and then just see it right in front of your face. So I don't know if it's the time, or I know it's always evolved, but I feel like now it's quite difficult just to not be around the negative virtues in this world.
Yes, I mean, it's that's an excellent point. It's considered a degenerate time where virtues are declining, and I mean, we see this in the American social discourse. There's so much hostility and divisiveness, and I'm just thinking about, I have a personal friend who I've known for like 40 years, and I love him in a way, like we've shared a lot of adventures together, but he just has a habit of feeling like he needs to fill the air constantly with talking. Like it's kind of an expression of his anxiety, which he talks about, and I notice how easy it is for me to get pulled into discussions and like forgetting, why did I engage in this discussion? I know first my intention is to help and be a friend, but at what point do I just start going on and on and on about the story rather than trying to think about how to be skillful in redirecting the story into like, how can we learn from this? What's a good way to resolve this? Or if there's no point being made, can I just be silent and smile at my friend? I remember, I'll just say one other thing here. When I went to our Dharma group, we went to Portland. 4 of us went down there to ask Yongsen Rinpoche to be our spiritual guide. And, we made a formal request and the other 3 people they all had things to do and they went off by themselves. And I ended up with the teacher alone. And he said, he invited me to go for a drive out the Columbia Gorge and look at waterfalls. And so here I was sitting with my teacher, and I'm like, I was kind of nervous, like, like feeling like I was in the seat with a holy man, and like, what am I supposed to talk about? And he wasn't saying anything. He was just smiling, driving the car. So gradually I just kind of like didn't say anything and just enjoyed being in the car. And mostly for like 2 hours, we hardly spoke a word, but I was just kind of in his presence. It was delightful. But yeah, it's really hard these speech virtues are really difficult to master at work and among family. And so keep up the good practice.
Yeah, I find it with especially when you have friendships and folks who want to vent to you. I find myself in a place where I do want to shift the conversation from like gossip and complaints, and I'll lead into like, how can I support you? Is there anything I could do to help you find peace in this? Because it gets so poisonous if it goes on. I don't know if that's too strong to describe it, but like I'm finding that with like closer relationships, that it's like you want to make space for them, but at the same time you don't want to absorb the negative virtues that are streaming in so heavily.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely practice. I feel really lucky because, I see people every day, and there's a little small talk that goes on, like check in, and sometimes I have to do some kind of mental judo to kind of shift the energy. And so I just try to practice it every day. I don't know, Jeremy, do you have any thoughts on how you keep that balance of engaging without getting into the negative speech virtues?
Oh, with me, I think it's just a matter of kind of staying on your side of the street, so to speak. I I can spend a lot of time thinking 99% of the problems are, the society or the other person's fault. But I just, I try to stick to my 1%, I guess. And it's easier to do when I have a regular practice going, and am mindful of things. I did this week. I don't know if I did this retreat. I think I told you at Sravasti, and maybe that was how I first heard about you, Gordon.
Mhm.
But they also told me about like a practice group, a lay practice group that meets every morning online. So I did that this week because I'm kind of getting into the Seattle winter thing, and I go to bed really early. I'm waking up very early, so I have time. I have time to meditate in the morning, and yeah, it's just it's a little bit busy. It's all they kind of try to cover all the bases. So I'm kind of all over the place, so it's hard to stay focused. But I do, yeah, the whole purification thing, because we do just sort of encounter stuff every day that, I was sick this week, and all I did was just hole up and watch a lot of crummy streaming stuff. And I do that a lot. I kind of am pretty mindful with news where I'll just buy a magazine, I'll read that rather than do social media to try and get the backstory and not get all emotional. But yeah, entertainment, I am horrible with. I feel like it just pollutes my mind, and I just have to cleanse it every day. And so I don't know. But yeah, it's the more my practice is going, the better I am with kind of not getting overwhelmed by other people. And it's easy to do. I think it's very strange. I think the last couple of years have really done a number on us. It's more and more, I feel, as a person that only goes into work 2 times a week. We just started doing 2 days, and everybody I don't want to do it. I think I think it's really changed us the last couple of years and causes everybody's anxious about everybody being around other people. You know, I feel like that's heightened. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you hit on the key point. It all comes back to having a daily practice where we can go to that quiet space and remember our intention to keep our 10 virtuous actions, keep practicing those and avoid the 10 negative ones. And the speech ones are particularly hard. And I used to get myself into all kinds of trouble on Facebook, and I still feel, I mean, it's sort of it's a delicate balance. And I don't know if my teachers would say I'm being foolish, but sometimes I will speak out for justice, even when I know it's going to stir up a lot of problems, because I have white male privilege, and I feel like it's important to use that. But and sometimes I'll get a lot of hateful or kind of negative feedback from other people, but I generally don't respond to it anymore. I just sort of like, okay, you can have an opinion. I made my short one opinion. I mean, social media isn't really great for having long conversations, unless there's sort of some shared understanding or friendship where so yeah, anyways, it's great to see you both this morning, and enjoy the day.
Thank you so much.
all right, good to see you all.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Have a good one.
You too.